Please do not intend to try this. The content of this video is solely based on past human experiences and may vary according to a person's physical or mental state at a specific moment. All the information shared are merely for educational and entertainment purposes only.
So, being in a state of coma has always puzzled many. Not so much medically, but rather the enthralling experiences people have, going through a coma. Even till today, despite all skepticism, a lot of medical experts tend to find some stories from patients to be somewhat mind-boggling, as it defies the laws of science and our human understanding. So what does it feel like to be in a coma? In medical terms, a coma is a profound deep state of unconsciousness, in which a person cannot be awakened. It is not a state of brain death, and the person is still very much alive. The definition of this state is basically the inability of a person to respond normally to any painful stimuli and light or sound, while being in a persistent vegetative state, not being able to physically feel, speak, or move. During this period, only vital key functions like breathing and circulation remains intact, as all of the higher functions in a person's brain has been shut off. But that being said, in some cases, spontaneous movements like sudden opening of eyes, change of expression, or occasionally even crying or laughing do occur. Now, generally speaking, there are two types of coma. One is of natural causes, and the other is what's known as a medical-induced coma. Coma of natural causes are basically comas relating to illnesses, head injuries, strokes, intoxications, etc. These comas last from days to weeks on average, but do go up to years in severe cases. A medical-induced coma, on the other hand, is where a person is intentionally put on a controlled dose of anesthetic drug, causing them to enter into a comatose state. This is slightly different from being in a normal coma, as it can be reversed by simply stopping the inflow of the anesthetic drug. However, according to past medical records, it has been shown that be it a natural coma or a medical-induced coma, they both have resulted equally in patients actually having wild experiences during this unconscious state. And some of it even being capable of changing the course of their medical conditions, which baffles medical experts. A coma experience in general basically leads to one of two ways: a pleasant and an unpleasant experience. In a coma, although there are some who literally have no memory of anything at all, there are quite a number who actually do. According to past reported cases, one of the more common experiences patients experience during a coma is basically having the ability to hear everything that's happening around them. As described by a patient being in an induced coma, she said it feels as if these voices goes through a weird filter in your brain, that may be of the drugs, and then hitting your consciousness. But as you won't be aware of the actual situation of your surroundings, your brain basically pictures a scene that somewhat relates to what's heard, and what's going on. She even explained that she experienced being in Alaska at one point, where she would just sit there, staring at the most beautiful scenery ever, while feeling freezing cold, and she didn't even care, not knowing that she had been given ice packs all around her, as she was having a high fever due to infection. But despite that, her experience was sort of a pleasant one if you'd ask me. There was a guy, on the other hand, who was in a 6-month coma. His experience was rather a torture and painful one to bear. The man thought he was stuck in the sewers underneath his favorite bar with an alligator. Not knowing what to do, he literally stared at the alligator throughout the whole period, feeling anxious and not moving a single bit. He said he knew he'd get attacked if he made even a single sound. Definitely an unpleasant experience to go through. There was another guy in his late 40s, who was put into a coma for a week, due to an undisclosed medical condition. He described his entire experience as feeling awfully tired throughout. He said he was lost in an unknown place, constantly wandering trying to find a place to fall asleep, but never did. He also mentioned that he had no knowledge at all of who he was, and what's going on. All he knew was that he was tired, and not being able to sleep. And what felt like months of unending pain to him, was actually just days in the real world. Guess it wasn't a pleasant experience either. Now, so far, the above experiences have seemed more like a mere dream to most. And some people might even think that they're somewhat explainable through certain circumstances. But what we're going to look into next will make you seriously question the human existence, and what's beyond our current scientific understandings. In rare coma cases, it has been recorded that some patients actually claim to have had out-of-body experiences. A girl in her 20s had fallen into a coma due to a severe car accident. She claimed that during the coma, there was a stage where she was in a critical condition, and the doctors had to remove her parents from the room, fearing they might lose her. That was when she remembered looking down on herself. She described her feeling then as a sense of peacefulness, as she saw several people work around her bed. She then said it was like looking through a wide aperture and that there was a lot of light present. The focus was soft, and in a short while, she was removed from what was going on. Now, in some cases, there have also been weird things happening to patients, not during the coma, but rather after they wake up. Many have experienced a breakthrough in language barrier, suddenly being able to understand and speak fluently in a language that is foreign to them. Croatian teenager Sandra woke up from her coma one day suddenly speaking fluent German, in which she had no knowledge of, also temporarily losing the ability to speak her native language. Former English footballer Rory woke up from his coma speaking fluent French. Rory claimed he did learn a bit when he was young in school, but definitely not at the level he was speaking. But it quickly vanished after a while, and didn't last long. Nobody really understood as to how a person's brain is able to access information it was not taught or exposed to. And apart from languages, there was also a 3-year-old Chinese girl, who mysteriously picked up an addiction to smoking and downing beers, after waking up from a coma due to a road crash. Her parents claimed that there was a big change in her personality after the incident, and that she had started acting like an adult. Her mother even found the 3-year-old hiding in a toilet, smoking her dad's cigarettes. This then escalated into the girl growing an addiction and succumbing into smoking a pack of cigarettes every day. Now, although these may still raise doubts, and sound unconvincing, to some of a medical or scientific background, this next story may very likely change the way you view things. This is a story from a renowned neurosurgeon, Eben, who used to be somewhat agnostic. What happened to him drastically changed his views towards a lot of things. During the appalling incident that put him into a coma, he was given an experience that was totally out of this world. He claimed that it allowed him to have a glimpse on a tiny fraction of what's known to be life's greater picture. Before it all happened, Eben had spent more than 20 years in academic neurosurgery. He always thought he had some kind of understanding towards how the brain, mind and consciousness work. But his neuroscientific views were quickly proven to be inadequate and far too simple after his experience. It all started when Eben returned from a work trip to Israel. He was feeling really ill one day. He was suffering from a severe back pain, which later put him into a coma the same day that lasted for a week. Apparently, Eben had contracted some sort of bacterial meningitis from one of the research laboratories during his trip, which soaked his brain, sending him into a deep coma. What's astonishing about his case was that as his near cortex was destroyed by the bacteria at the time of the coma, there was literally no brain activity, hence, rendering it impossible for him to have had the experience he claimed he had. In his coma, Eben was brought to places where one would think of as heaven. He highlighted that it didn't have any sort of body image, and that he was just a piece of awareness that was present there, and not as Eben, but rather his consciousness itself. He claimed his experience to have started off in an earthworm's eye view, in a coarse and murky realm, which he was then greeted by a white spinning light which approached him with a perfect musical melody. This light basically helped him to then ascend into what he claimed as a valley of greenery full of life, which he then experienced a whole lot, that were inexplainable in words, and colors that were beyond those of a rainbow. He claimed that at that time, he was literally a speck on what resembles a butterfly wing, that he described as much greater and different than of those on earth. It was also then that he realized a beautiful girl from afar looking at him with a very loving smile. This feeling of love transcends all forms of love which could be felt on earth, more of like an unconditional love. His journey then extended into many other worldly experiences, that he claimed had given him a little sense of knowledge towards the human existence and more. There were also quite a number of unexplainable occurrences which he talks about in his book. You may look it up if you're interested. But what's most shocking was that, in later parts of his life, as he was an adopted child, he managed to reunite with his birth family, whom he never met. It was then that he found out that he actually had a sister who passed away a few years ago. And upon looking at her photo, it was the same girl that he saw in his coma, with that same exact smile. This had further reassured his experience to be true to a certain extent. And it was then, he started to believe in what he experienced. Now, this isn't something a regular person may experience every day. It very well may not even happen in one's entire lifetime. Hence, causing people to wonder as more and more of these stories start to surface. So, do you believe in these stories? Share your thoughts below. Let us know what you know, or tell us your experience being in and through a coma. And to sum it up, even till today, doctors and medical experts are still unable to fully understand one's consciousness, and how it may or may not relate to our brain. But that being said, not all things in life are made to be known. So stay safe, my friends. And if you like the content, don't forget to leave a like or subscribe, as it'll greatly help us in growing our channel, allowing us to provide you with more constructive content in the future. See you next time.